Hello, and welcome on in to the Wolverine podcast. Anthony Broom here with Clayton Safey. Monday, December 23rd, our last show before the holidays. Open by saying Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy whatever makes you happy. Is that time of year. So at the end of the day, the time spent with family, friends, or whatever, brings you joy, brings you happiness. It's however you do that this time of year. Stay okay with me. I hope you find a way to do that. This is going to be a little more of a year in review type show. Not a whole lot has gone on in the transfer portal since last we spoke, although Michigan did pick up a commitment on Saturday from Troy Bowles, who's the son of Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach Todd Bowles. We won't get into so much that. Maybe we get a little more transfer portal in later this week, but it seems like it's becoming a bit of a tradition. Clayton and I here right before Christmas on that last Monday episode, sort of putting a bow on the year that was. Of course, last year or next week we'll be talking about a bowl game and some other things down in Tampa. But Clayton, welcome back.
Yeah, it's a dead period now for the transfer portal. Michigan's got 6 commits heading into that, so we'll see how much movement happens. I guess you could land some guys that visited over the weekend. Pretty star-studded group. And then, we're just under a week away from Michigan, Alabama to cap off the year. First day of the year, Michigan, Alabama. Last day of the year, Michigan, Alabama. So a lot's happened for sure in between those.
It is, and we'll talk about what has happened this year. We will also discuss maybe some takeaways from the opening weekend of the college football playoff. Check in on Michigan basketball, who won a game yesterday over Purdue Fort Wayne. And then, as we do every week, and probably a little more so this week as our gift to our listeners, our followers, we'll end with a Q&A. We'll take everything that we got from the fort to close things out. But before we do that, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping here. We are brought to you today, of course, by us. First and foremost, that $1 deal that'll get you 2 months of access to our website for a single dollar. It's the best deal in America. As Clayton Safey says, promo code UM1. It's up there on the screen if you're watching the video edition of our show. Use that promo code today for 2 months of access for $1 using UM1. And we are also brought to you by our friends over at Homefield Apparel. And I have some bad news for you guys. If you are listening to this on the 23rd, get out and finish your shopping. If you just need to go the gift card route, go with our friends at homefieldapparel.com. A great Michigan collection over there. Some of the most comfortable stuff that I own. You can use that promo code Wolverine for 15% off your first order. Gift cards are there. You've got the subscription boxes. You've got crew necks. You've got joggers. You've got the T-shirts. And even if it's not for the Michigan fan in your life, there's a lot of other schools on there. So use that promo code Wolverine for 15% off your first order over at homefieldapparel.com. All right, Clayton, let's do a little bit of reminiscing here, and maybe not exactly beat for beat, timeline by timeline sort of thing. But, this time last year, heading into the new year, heading into January 1, we are talking about a Michigan football team that was 13-0, earns a berth in the college football playoff, makes it to the Rose Bowl, plays Alabama, winds up beating Alabama, winds up beating Washington for a national championship. And, there's not a whole lot to rehash about all of that other than it feels like it was both 10 years ago and also yesterday. It was not that long ago that we were picking confetti out of our pockets in Houston or in Los Angeles, in Houston. A little less than a year out from that now, we sit here and reflect on that. I mean, what a cap it was on the Jim Harbaugh era. And I've said this before, to a certain extent this year, kind of the epilogue to the Jim Harbaugh era, but specifically the fact that we are, they're in the process of deciding a national champion now with the 12-team playoff, but still a couple more weeks, almost a month to kind of revel in what was a special year for Michigan football. You are muted, my friend.
I am muted, so nothing I said mattered. It was nonsense anyway. But so much has happened since and it does feel like yesterday that Michigan was playing in those playoff games. Now we've already had 4 playoff games under our belt this year, but You've had a coaching change in football. You've had a coaching change in basketball. Football, a little bit of a disappointment. Basketball, they're looking very, very good and completely different. Already with 9 wins after having just 8 wins last season. So, I mean, huge changes. Sherrone Moore with 1 game left in his first season and going into year 2. Michigan's done a pretty good job on the NIL front where people feel pretty good about what next year could be. So it's just like the changes that have happened so quick over this last year are kind of crazy. But I mean, the fact that you're starting out the year the way you did, and then everything that came after, it was pretty remarkable. What occurred at the beginning and now at the end, a lot of question marks with the football program, but at the same time, you feel like Sherrone Moore starting to put a stamp on his era, what it's going to be moving forward with recruiting going well and beating Ohio State. Just some massive developments over the last month or so for the football program.
1,000%. I think maybe that's where I camp out for a bit in terms of, as special as last year was, you cap it off with a national title. Jim Harbaugh is on to the NFL. Shout out Jim Harbaugh. Huge win Thursday night. Who would have, if you would have told me or set Vegas odds on who the next NFL head coach to exploit the free kick rule would be, I don't even think Harbaugh's name. I think they would have just taken that bet off the board. I think Harbaugh easily would have been that guy. What a cool moment that was.
He tried it at San Fran too, but it was like a 71-yarder, didn't go. But yeah, he said he's been dreaming of having the opportunity to do that again. It was a perfect chance to do it, and I mean, help them get momentum going into the half. That was incredible. I wish he would have done one at Michigan.
It was incredible. That game, so often we go, oh, that was a big play, it was a momentum changing play. That completely changed the trajectory of that game. Like they were dead in the water in that second quarter. So shout out to him. But to come off a national title year where you have to essentially top to bottom reshape, refocus what this operation is going to look like around Sherrone Moore. It was a bit tumultuous early on, just with, you thought you were going to keep Ben Herbert and he leaves. You were hoping to keep Mike Elston and Steve Klingscale. They both leave. You basically have to hire. You do have to hire an entirely new coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball. One of your assistants gets popped for a DUI, and then you have to go hire someone else, and then one of your key staffers gets popped for a DUI, and you have to deal with that. And I thought there were times. I think there was one time specifically when we talked to Sherrone Moore during spring ball where he looked exhausted, and there was a lot to deal with, a lot of fires to put out, a lot of plugging holes to do early on. And what I was impressed with this year was that, throughout not just the coaching hires, not just through some of the struggles on the field, not through, whatever it was, I think that he did a tremendous job kind of keeping this thing together and keeping it afloat. And when you have the amount of talent that you have, I think that helps with that. You can go out and play Ohio State and just let Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant get after it and completely dominate and take over a game. But I think it speaks to, and people will break it down on a case-by-case basis. But I think for the most part, this team stayed bought in. I think that he proved that, in a lot of ways, this was going to be, and who knows what the future holds. We often say no man knows the future, but coming out of the Jim Harbaugh era, whenever you follow, let's call him what he is, a legend at this point, there are going to, that's a lot to thrust on someone who's never had a head coaching job before. And there were some bumps in the road, game management wise. I think there's still probably some things that need to be worked on, but top to bottom, I think you come out of this year with keeping on, winning your rivalry games, keeping all your trophies in house. And more so when things got, this was a 5-5 football team heading in the last 2 weeks of the year. A lot of guys could have been packing it in, opting out, just kind of resting up. They kind of refocused and bought back in and kind of it's led to what this offseason is now, which is one of excitement for this program.
It's hard to be the guy after the guy, like you said, and it's even hard for a guy with head coaching experience. Kalen DeBoer comes into, from Washington, did a great job there. Only lost 3-4 games in 3 seasons, or 2 seasons, and then did a great job at Fresno State before that. But at Alabama, they have some bumps in the road themselves. I mean, they lose to Oklahoma, who was 6-6. They lost to Vandy, who finished 6-6. They hadn't lost to Vandy in like 40 years. It's just hard to do, even with the amount of talent that both guys had on their roster. Probably Alabama a little bit more across the board, Michigan with a bunch of top-end guys, and they still lose 5 games. But the fact that they did win the Ohio State game, I think, does a ton for him. I mean, the conversation we're having, I think, would be a lot different if they don't pull that off. But that's the nature of being the head coach at Michigan. That game's really important, and they were able to find the right formula to win that game. So it carries a ton of weight. It gives you momentum. It allows Sherrone Moore to go and throw T-shirts at the basketball game into the crowd, and everyone gives him the warmest possible reception. And a couple weeks ago when he was at the game against Iowa, he's doing the flag planting gesture, and everybody loves it. Like, I mean, the difference of winning that game and losing that game is so big, and it certainly helps, brings the vibes up, I think, for them going into next season. Got to win this last game, but after that, it's retooling. You're already kind of working on that, but retooling everything, making sure that things are going to be moving in a positive direction moving forward, and maybe we can look at the Ohio State game as kind of a turning point or jumping off point for Sherrone Moore.
Yeah, and obviously a big part of that jumping off point and sort of this program momentum is how they were able to sort of pull off what a lot of people thought was unthinkable. And bringing in a guy like Bryce Underwood, it's maybe one of the biggest developments this year is not only we go from Michigan being a program that, I don't want to not to rehash this argument, but the transactional versus transformational thing, and they weren't going to pay guys, and they were just going to be, content in finding these diamonds in the rough and coaching them up. And Sherrone and Sean McGee and everyone involved in that, the Ellisons, Dave Portnoy, Champion Circle, you kind of landed not just a signature moment, but for Sherrone Moore, but I think institutionally kind of a big moment for Michigan in that, hey, we have people that love this university enough, that are willing to engage with this university enough to kind of pony up to get the best player in America here and more of the best players in America, in Michigan, to go to Michigan out of high school. I think there has been, Michigan's always recruited this state pretty well, but there have been guys that have gone elsewhere, not even to like big time schools, just, to the Kentuckys of the world, to the, Cincinnati's of the world, just throwing a couple names out there, but guys that you should be able to keep as kind of the lightning rod program in this state, an elite program in this state. And I think that the Bryce Underwood commitment to me wasn't just a sign that, they had money in the coffers to go fix this quarterback situation, but it was a sign that Michigan is ready for a higher form of roster building. And, they at least finished the early period with the 9th ranked class in the country. Of course, a couple guys still out there that could boost that before the February signing day. Portal class, you're up to 6 guys so far. I like what they've brought in. We're still waiting on that quarterback domino to fall. I'm still waiting on. There's a couple big name guys kind of still out there too that they're lingering on. But, outside of the on-field and, game performance that took a big step forward in those final 2 weeks, I think what we've seen operationally from not just the Michigan football program, but, the people involved in getting NIL going, Bryce Underwood was more than just fixing the quarterback position. I think that was kind of symbolic that they are ready for more than that.
Yeah, and they had to change how they recruited based on, the changes in college football. You can't just recruit the same way that you did from 2016 when you brought in a top 10 class to, 2022 when I believe you were either right on the verge of top 10 or in the top 10, because pay for play is now here. I mean, in March, it became legal. And the 2023 and 2024 classes, it was essentially legal for, other schools to do that. Michigan maybe hadn't adapted or had the support that they needed in those classes. And I think we've seen kind of the bottom half of the roster reflect that, that they're recruiting more around number 20 in the country as opposed to top 10, top 12. So now that they're changing their approach, they're back in that top 10, as you said, at number 9. They could move up depending on what they do in the late period. So that, is a really good indication of what they can be moving forward, because because it's not like Jim Harbaugh didn't recruit at a high level. He was an outstanding recruiter, especially doing it the way Michigan did over those 9 years, really ever since his first class, which he had only about a month to work on in 2015, the Alex Malzone class, Tyreek Cannell, those guys way back when. But, you were also able to develop at an insanely high level. Last year, sending 13 guys that got drafted 18 overall that went to the NFL, and a lot of them, weren't 4- and 5-star recruits. There were certainly that a good deal of them were, but they developed at a high level. Okay, Jim Harbaugh is not here anymore. You're going to probably have to win a different way. Can you buy yourself some time as well, for Sherrone Moore to grow into this role by getting a bunch of talent that helps you out, helps you win some games. And then as he learns and grows and gets better, like every coach does, you may have something in a few years. So I think that's the hope right now. But they had to get the recruiting back on track, and they certainly have. And now a lot riding on the transfer portal too. They're doing a pretty good job there. And we'll see if they land, some of these big fish that are still kind of remaining on the board as well, which we'll have a hot board out. It's out right now, actually, if you're already listening or watching over at thewolverine.com. So there's some talented guys they're in on. It doesn't matter if you don't land them, right? I mean, it's not about finishing second in this crazy world of recruiting, but if you do, I mean, you got a good chance of bolstering the roster right now. You have a good chance of continuing your momentum in high school recruiting. So it's been huge. You're going to have that happen, and luckily the Ellisons jump on board. I mean, that was just so big, and just kind of out of nowhere in a way. Something that nobody expected, but could be massive going forward, depending on how involved they are and others.
1,000%. I think there are a lot of donors, just to kind of jump in on that conversation for a bit. I think there are a lot of donors that were waiting to see. I mean, even Jolyn herself told Dave Portnoy they were waiting for other donors to kind of show the same amount of passion on it that they had. So maybe, hopefully that's a turning point. It feels like it was to a certain extent. And again, you sit back and when you look at what this transfer portal class could look like, I think that there are a lot of people sort of irritated that, where's the money cannon was out. Why can't we just go grab, the best, most expensive toys and plug them in? And I think at the end of the day, it's the one area where I'll say, let's wait till the portal process is done, take a step back, look at where they've improved in each spot, and we'll see if that's enough to kind of be the chemical mixture they need to make sure that, a 7-5 season doesn't happen again, that you can talk about being in this 12-team playoff as early as next year. And that's where I want to pivot now into some playoff talk. 4 games this weekend, 4, relatively speaking, pretty lopsided games this weekend. And that included, Notre Dame taking down Indiana. All of the home teams won. There were no surprises there. I mean, they were all projected to win. None of them were really that competitive, although I thought SMU had a chance early on to kind of make things interesting against Penn State. Clemson hung in there against Texas.
Clemson was, in terms of game flow, Clemson was the closest, even though Indiana was the closest on the scoreboard. But every home team and favorite won and covered. So I guess our picks were okay for last week.
No, well, my picks were terrible, but that's
my picks were okay.
I'll let you speak on our behalf, because I've said a lot of stupid stuff on this show.
Well, me too.
Over this last
I did happen to make some coin over the weekend on some of those games.
I was over, but you know what? I'm full. My heart is full in holiday cheer, I guess. We'll just pivot to the Christmas Day NFL games. There's been a lot of talk about, and again, you heard the SEC talking point up this weekend. And to me, it's just so tiring because I think that when you look at it, I think they got it right. Like these people crying about Alabama and Ole Miss, especially Alabama, like you lost to a 6-win Vanderbilt team. You got blown out by a terrible Oklahoma team. Like to me, that's like conversation over. Like if you just want to put together like a television program that you're most interested in watching, then yeah, just take the teams that have recruited the best over the last 3 or 4 years and put them on the field together. And then it's an invitational and we can do this hypothetical thing. I think the best thing about this regular season, the best thing about this format is that, you know what? Hey, Indiana, you went 11-1 and played a Big Ten schedule, although it was lighter. But, to me, I think you still get credit for blowing out most of the teams you played. Let's go settle it on the field. Let's go see if you can hang with a Notre Dame. And guess what? They couldn't, mostly because Kurt Signetti turned into a pumpkin in that game. But this, to me, I don't have an issue with how it played out because, one, I think it's going to make for better. What do we always talk about with the NCAA tournament? Like the opening round upsets are amazing. But then when you get into that second weekend or you get into Sunday, you get into the second weekend, I don't like a lot of times those matchups, I think, suffer for it, as fun as that opening weekend can be. The best 4 teams that played this weekend moved on. And I think we're going to get 4 pretty good games between New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to change the format probably in a few years or maybe even next year, where, you don't, the buys don't go to necessarily conference champions. It'll just be the top 4 ranked teams. And then a few years, I think, and hopefully we get to 16 teams in this playoff. But yeah, I mean, there have been blowouts in the 14 playoff most years. The last couple of years, there hasn't been as many, but even 2 years ago, you had a blowout in the national championship game, Georgia over TCU. And last season it wasn't a blowout, Michigan over Washington, but they pulled away and it wasn't really close at the end. So, this isn't abnormal. The SEC, can whine and complain all they want. Maybe Alabama is better than Indiana. I'd probably pick them to, but at some point merit has to come into this. And Indiana won a lot more games than Alabama. You can only blame yourself for not making it in with 3 losses. So, not surprised by many of the results. I think it sets up a really good quarterfinal round. But yeah, I mean, you saw a bunch of people tweeting about it on Saturday night, where Michigan was mentioned like 20 times in the broadcast, which is kind of funny, the Ohio State-Tennessee game. And then people were tweeting like maybe Michigan could have won the SEC. I don't think that would have been the case, but they're really not that far off. I mean, I think they should have beat Indiana, and that's why I picked Notre Dame last week on our shows, because I saw Indiana in person. I wasn't impressed when they went up against some top-level talent. And, Notre Dame has similar talent to Michigan. And, so we see that result ends up being 10 points at the end, but it was, Notre Dame was in control of that game pretty much from start to finish, long touchdown run and everything else. But yeah, I mean, Michigan can get right back in it. And what would Michigan's record have been if they had Indiana's schedule? They might be in the playoff. I mean,
yeah.
So, you're going to get breaks. You're going to get these unbalanced schedules now because the conferences are so big, but it opens up an opportunity. But it does also make you think that Michigan should be in that playoff based on the caliber of team that we saw on Saturday night. More years than not. Really, 75% of the time, I would think. Mm-hmm. Maybe 25% of the time they should be a top 4 team. We'll see what the Sherrone Moore era is. I think maybe that's what the calculation would have been if Jim Harbaugh were still here. But, Michigan was not a very good team this year. Again, the Ohio State win does carry a lot of weight, the way we're talking about Michigan. And so does, a lot of the talent that's leaving helps that argument that Michigan's pretty close. But yeah, you get a schedule like Indiana's 1 year, and even if you're not that good, you may get in. Probably if you're Michigan, you end up being better, even with a tougher schedule some other years. So they'll be in this thing, I think, pretty quickly.
I think so too. Especially, I mean, I don't know what next year's team looks like yet, but that schedule's a lot more forgiving than. I mean, it's 3. You might have the 3 best teams in the college football playoff were on Michigan's schedule this year. And an additional team in Indiana, on Michigan's schedule this past year. So To me, I think two of my bigger takeaways is one, I don't know where really like in any playoff. Let's just use the NFL for example. They have 14. Are there more than 3 or 4 teams that can win a Super Bowl in the NFL this year? I don't think so. That's pretty typically the case. Are there more than 3 or 4 teams that can win a national title this year? Probably not. I think it would probably be Texas, Oregon, Ohio State. I would say Georgia, but they've got the quarterback injury. I mean, Notre Dame might be a dark horse, but really in any playoff, you don't have every team that's capable of winning the whole thing, but you earn your way. And I don't know how to standardize what qualifies a playoff team when you have 4 power conferences, you have unbalanced schedules, you have these different strength of schedule type things. I don't know how you say, set a hard and fast, like who belongs in, who doesn't. I think they got it right though. It's just, that's why you play the games.
We'll never know, but because all these hypothetical games, these hypothetical teams that have played poorly at multiple times this year would have hypothetically won big over all these other teams, apparently, or at least kept it closer with the teams that won than the teams that lost did. I mean, once the playoff happens, you can pretend all you want that what was going to happen, but we all thought Alabama would go in and roll Oklahoma, right?
Well, this is why I'm so in favor of why they're doing it this way, because we don't have to have the conversations. Like, put them on the field and see what happens. I don't know that. I don't know that I don't know how the math would work, but are you mean to tell me that some of these people would rather watch? And you see people say, "Oh, it should have stayed 4," or "Oh, they only should have went to 8." You mean to tell me that watching a bowl game with some of these teams where half their team opts out and they're playing in front of a 60% full crowd in an NFL stadium does anything for you? It doesn't for me. So I like that we have games that matter. I like that we, I like that they're going to settle it on the field. And like I said, we're going to have 4 pretty good games. My other takeaway was on-campus games are awesome. I wish there were more of them in this playoff. It's a bummer. It's only the first round. It's weird that, one of the benefits of being a top 4 team doesn't include hosting a game at home. You would think that would be one of the bigger advantages of it, but it's not. I can't wait until we cover a playoff game in December at the Big House. I think it'll be pretty darn cold, but I thought some of those environments are pretty cool.
They were. I mean, especially the cold ones. It was kind of weird watching so much cold weather football, and then when Clemson versus Texas came on, it was like completely different, but still a great atmosphere down there. It's awesome. So we'll be there in a few years when Michigan goes down there in September of 2027, right? So yeah, it's amazing atmospheres. I do agree. I think probably quarterfinals should be on campus, but at the same time, if I were a team going on the road, I'd much rather just play in a neutral site. Because those can be fun too. I think I've enjoyed that, but yeah, the on campus is great. When you saw the videos coming out of Notre Dame, on Friday morning, and people are already drinking and tailgating everything, and the atmosphere, you could almost watch a video of the tailgating scene and kind of feel the tension surrounding that stadium. It kind of made you want to be a part of that, and I think that's part of it too. A lot of these teams are motivated by that, seeing the opportunity having this playoff, wanting to get there, and knowing that it's attainable. Because there are 12 teams now. Some teams that never would have sniffed the 14 playoff will get the chance to get in, like in Indiana. Tennessee never made it, right? I mean, Boise, SMU, all sorts of teams that are in there for the first time. So it's going to be fun going forward. I think there'll be changes to the format. I think they'll expand in a few years. But I think we're on a good path with the playoff. I do think they should, again, the buys should go to the top 4 ranked teams because Penn State ironically gets an easier path by losing to Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. Same thing. Texas has a better path as the loser of the SEC championship game. So they probably need to fix that. But other than that, I love the format.
Yeah. I mean, I have no issues with that at all. I think that's a good place to pin it there. Let's talk about, this is what happens when I'm not prepared.
Hardwood.
We'll go to the hardwood. Move to Michigan basketball, who moved to 9-3 on the season with a 89-58. Was that the number? Win over, yes, it was, over Purdue Fort Wayne on Sunday at Chrysler Center. Nice to get the bad taste out of your mouth of those last two games. I think that first and foremost, I think that was the biggest takeaway. I think that, again, for a lot of these guys, like, you knew if they were going to have a game where they shot whatever it was, 4 from 28 for 3, they were going to have one where they were just absolutely on fire because water always finds its level. I don't have a whole lot to say about the game itself. I know we talked about Arkansas and Oklahoma on the last show we did, but nice little milestone. Not that it's a huge bar to climb. You have more wins officially than last season, which we can stop using that as a talking point now. I think that's over and done with. We can kill that season with fire. You're going to have one more tune-up coming up on December 29th at home against Western Kentucky at 8:30 p.m. And then you make that trip out to L.A. Still a weird sentence to say. You're going to go out to L.A. for your Big Ten opener after the new year in terms of the wide-ranging slate, playing at UCLA and then at USC and then at UCLA. So, I don't know. Watching the game, to me, it didn't. It really, to me, impressed by the margin, but more or less what I expected to see, just in terms of a bounce back.
I mean, there was no drama winning that game, and some of these games in December, the last few years, Michigan has struggled and really lost one they shouldn't have. I mean, dating back to a few years ago, December of 2022, they lose to UCF. I believe December of 2022 or 2021. Whatever one that was, I guess 21. So they've lost one of these late December games each year. This time against, these low majors, mid majors, they have not had any trouble blowing them out, which is a really good sign because, Penn State looks pretty good this year. They were in kind of a shootout with Purdue Fort Wayne, who can really score. Michigan shut them down. The worst scoring mark of the season in terms of points per possession for Purdue Fort Wayne. They couldn't make a shot, kind of looked like Michigan the other night against Oklahoma, except I thought Michigan did a really good job defending the three-point shot for Purdue Fort Wayne. They averaged 27 attempts per game. 4 of their makes out of however many they made came in garbage time. They started to get some to go in, but and then on the flip side, Michigan just kind of overwhelms them and, makes 10 of their first 13 threes. And, this was not really a game. Once they had that run early in the second half, it was over. So the bench played well. They bounced back. Is something we talked about on Thursday's show, that the guys off the bench had to step up and be a little bit more consistent. Reuben Jones, who got a little bit banged up, hit a 3. LJ Kaysen hit a 3 on his first possession offensively. Some other guy, Pippen came in, I thought looked really good, really poised, and hit a few shots himself. He hasn't been that assertive in there yet, kind of feeling out the game, but you can tell he's got a good feel for the game already. So they're going to need those guys. It was good to see Kaysen find the floor again, had 2 DNPs in a row until yesterday. But a lot of the things that they needed to do, in my opinion, make some shots, get some more bench production, they did. The turnovers, though, just continue to be a problem, especially in that first half. They cleaned him up a little bit in the second, but it was turnover, made shot, turnover, made shot for a while. It was something they gotta figure out. Maybe not eliminate, just limit, because hey, if you turn over 14, 15 times a game instead of 18 or 19, that's a huge difference. And this team's good at pretty much everything else, good enough to win at, as long as they limit those a little bit.
That's the biggest thing, is that I think we have a pretty good idea of what this team is and what they can be at this point. Michigan's staff was, I think, pretty dead on when they said it would probably take about a month or so to figure that out. And, they're still figuring some things out too. But to me, I think it's pretty clear at this point, like, this team, I think, can, and I'm not saying they will win every game on their schedule, but they can beat any team that they play. I have no doubts about that at all, especially with the pace they play, with the amount of shots that they take from beyond the arc. If/when the time comes where, I'll just put it this way. It's not a hot take. Like when they have these setbacks, it's likely going to become because one, they're turning over the ball too much, or two, they didn't shoot the ball very well. And I think one is they've shown they can win games where they don't shoot particularly well. It's the turnovers, and at this point, to keep harping on it, even Dusty after the game was more or less like, hey, other than the thing that we always talk about after games, was pretty happy with the performance. So to me, you get a better team next week in Western Kentucky, team that looks like maybe a little more difficult than your typical like non-conference bye game finale. They play faster than Michigan does, so I'll certainly probably bet the over in that game. But I don't really have
knows that too.
Yeah,
and Purdue Fort Wayne couldn't hit the. They didn't help much.
Yeah, well, that was the other good thing too, is that the defense I thought was much better, and saw some progress there. So any other thoughts on hoops? I don't. It was kind of just a good day, a good solid day at the office, and the first time in what I have to look back here. Since Fort Myers, so they weren't in a one possession game, so able to kind of take a deep breath and exhale from there.
Yeah, and I think, just how much better Michigan's gotten throughout the year already. I know there are these issues that keep popping up, like Dusty May. What can you even ask him anymore about the turnovers? It's like he knows it's an issue. They're trying to fix it. He said multiple times that he doesn't know exactly what the root cause is because there are so many different types of them, and that was the case again in this game. You trust that they'll work on it. They'll try to limit them. I don't know how much success they'll have in doing that, and probably at some point down the road, those are going to be what does them in a one or done type of situation. But they have improved a lot throughout the season in a bunch of different areas, including rebounding, half-court offense. Remember the Wake Forest game? And Wake is not a very good team at all at this point in the year. The Wake game, the half-court offense was stagnant. They didn't really know what to do. Dusty was talking about, we spent so much time over the summer talking about the play after the play and what kind of action we run once the initial one is shut down. And then he was disappointed with how they executed once they were actually in that environment. And, now the half-court offense has gotten a lot better. They found their bread and butter with Danny Wolf running the ball screen with Vlad Golden. Golden has, completely turned around his season. It's hilarious almost to think back at some of the conversations we had about his inability to finish at the rim. Now he's finishing about everything, bunch of dunks. I still think the guards need to be more consistent, but, I think the shooting as well. But they've improved a lot at a lot of the things that they needed to coming out early in the season. So there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to moving forward either, which is kind of scary because, like you said, they can beat anybody on their schedule. That includes in the tournament, literally anybody. They have that type of upside, and now they can kind of just work on the things they need to continue to improve at their strengths. And I think this team's got a good shot here heading into the Big Ten season after the Western Kentucky game. Yeah,
last point I was going to make, I forgot to bring this up. Dusty was asked about LJ Cason's usage of late after the game and basically said needs better practice habits. And it seems like, at least for now, and the eyeball test would kind of bear this out too, I think Justin Pippen might kind of lead it's going to be interesting to follow throughout the year, like where these freshmen are against each other in the power rankings. I think right now Justin Pippen is who they feel is their most playable freshman. And to me, I think that's a good move. I think he looks wise behind, looks like he's played college basketball for a few years. Just really smart heads up player that I don't know how high his ceiling is, but he's pretty steady. And I'm excited to see how he continues to develop. So Michigan's at 9-3. Like I said, they will finish out their non-conference next Sunday at Chrysler Center against Western Kentucky, and then go to LA from there and get this Big Ten play going in a bigger way. Before we get into
real quick, Pippen does look like that ninth guy right now. We'll see how it evolves, but I do think there's going to be a point in the year when LJ Cason comes in and changes a game, a Big Ten game on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, and you need a spark. He's got that potential, so I'm not really worried. I think these are growing pains that a lot of freshmen go through in terms of practice habits and learning what it means to be a college basketball player, showing up every day, putting in the work, also dealing with classes and final exams and everything else. So he's going to turn a corner at some point. He's going to change a game or, multiple games, a tournament game at some point this year. We've already seen him do that a couple times. He scored double-digit points, I think, in 4 games at this point, or maybe 7 or more in 4 different games. So he's going to do that. And remember, Trey Burke did not start his first game as a freshman at Michigan because the same thing. He wasn't doing what John Beilein told him to do in practice and everything else, and the way he had to attack it as a point guard. Then he goes on to have, the freshman year he had, the sophomore year he had. So I think LJ Cason's going to have that Jordan Poole trajectory. When Jordan Poole, second half of his freshman year, I think the Indiana game was kind of the turning point for him, where he comes in, scores a whole bunch of points, huge spark off the bench. I'm not saying Cason's as good as Poole, 1-for-1 there, but there's going to come a point in time where they need him.
1,000%. I'm not out on him at all. It's just freshman things. That's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
We will close this show out with our Q&A segment, but want to also talk about our friends over at 5-Star Fans. The thrill, the heartbreak, the pride. Being a fan is a wild ride. With 5-Star Fans, you can finally get in on the game like ever before. 5-Star Fans is the place where fiercely loyal fans can directly reward their favorite players, and for a limited time, they're going to give you $5 to send to your favorite players. So visit 5-starfans.com today. Get your $5 to send to your favorite player when you sign up at 5starfans.com. I don't know where my voice is going, but shout out to 5-Star Fans for their support of our show. We are going to finish our show with questions now that we took over at the Fort, our premium message board, and I'm going to fire through all of them here, and we'll keep it as free flowing as we can here. But this is from Ozzy Mattias, who says, crunchy or puff Cheetos?
Crunchy, but you got to mix it up. Haven't had them in a long time though.
Yeah, same. I'm a puffs guy. Like both though. Not I don't really feel the need to elaborate there.
I wasn't expecting that as your first question.
I'm going in chronological order. I don't
like
even
it.
know what's all here. So maybe I'll say something inappropriate on accident. We'll see what happens. This is from T-Shad29, who wants to know, what is your least favorite time of year for coverage?
That's tough. What do you got?
I feel like there's like that 5 or 6 week stretch between like camp season in June and then when we go to Big Ten Media Days where there's just nothing. Like we've wrapped football preview. We can hardly stomach, looking at any more roster boxes or things like that. There's just not a whole lot going on. So I would say that, or underratedly, maybe. That's tough. I don't know. Like, I don't have a least favorite. We just have like busier times and not as busy.
Yeah. I don't mind the not as busy for a little while.
Yeah. No, we actually get to enjoy our summer a little bit.
You get the 4th of July and all that. Usually not a ton going on. Maybe fall camp for me, just because I want the season to start. And like 2 or 3 weeks into fall camp, it's like, all right, nothing else can be said right now that changes what I think about anything. And we just have to see it, at a certain point. So maybe that, just because it's a lot of waiting and speculation, but also there's a decent amount to talk about. So, but no, I mean, the whole year is great. My favorite part about this is the ebbs and flows of the calendar and how there's always something different to talk about. I love basketball season. I love the overlap between football and basketball. That might be the best part. And then, okay, I love when it's big basketball games twice a week. You get that. And then spring ball starts. So there's always something new going on, which I love about it.
I've come to kind of like transfer portal season just because of, all of these possibilities. And I think you almost get to learn about the guys that even don't line up at Michigan and you sort of follow them. And hey, they come back around in the schedule. You've got some history in at least knowing who this guy was. That's why when I covered the NFL, I liked like free agency and the draft. I think was arguably the most fun thing to cover about the league. So it's
probably one of the more important things to cover about the NFL. In terms of like fans, they all watch the games, but in the offseason, they're searching for who's going to be on the team and everything else. I agree with transfer portal. It's a little annoying because things are moving so fast, but you also have it's truth serum for the coaching staff. They don't go after a guy if they think the guys at that position group are really good or difference makers or all that. So you, like, to your point about learning a lot, like, you learn a lot about what the real hard truth is inside that building about some of these players.
Yeah, and you learn about where guys stand by when they enter the portal now. Guy like Dom Jadis, for example, started games at center and seems like they want to get a little better there. So he's not part of that. So no disrespect to him. Just all of those moves are very telling about what a stat, people get tired of hearing what you and I think about their roster. When you see the moves that they make, then I love the truth serum thing. That's a great call. Let's move on to John Doe, who says, will it be Ohio and Penn State in the championship game? I would still bet against that, but it's possible, right? Like, I think right now you reset everything. I still kind of like, Texas or Oregon at the top of that bracket. And the bottom is where it gets really interesting because I don't know how Georgia is going to, what Georgia team is going to show up. So, yeah, I don't know. I hope not.
Me too. With the Penn State draw, that as soon as the bracket comes out, right? I said it earlier in the show. Penn State got a better draw than Oregon after losing to Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. The draw got even better when you see that Carson Beck is going to be out for the college football playoff. Notre Dame is a very good team. They obviously are happy with that news as well. But who do you trust more? Neutral field, one game, Penn State or Notre Dame? I don't know. I think it's a toss-up. I may trust the quarterback that can throw better, and that's Drew Aller in Penn State. So, I mean, it's hard to say you trust Penn State more in a big game, but he's improved. He's gotten better. They hung in there a little bit with Oregon, made it competitive. But, I mean, the top half, I think Texas likes their draw, but you do have to go through Ohio State or Oregon, who look like maybe the two best teams. So would I bet that it's Ohio State, Penn State? No. But I think it's one of those top possibilities for sure, which is crazy. So, yeah, I mean, Texas, I think, is still my Natty champ, but we'll see.
Yeah, and the thing about Ohio State, too, is I think to a certain extent, and it was funny to see Jack Sawyer right back to talking trash on the sideline and all that on Saturday. Yeah, if they play like they did Saturday, like I could see them getting there. I mean, they still have as much talent as anyone here. I question anyone who finds a way to get them into a 4-quarter game. I think you learn a lot about who they are when that happens. So I would bet against that, but we'll see. It's possible. We just took one from John Doe. Let's go to Jay Schultz, who wants to know, what are the next 2 players that Michigan picks up in the transfer portal? And I didn't want to bring this up on the show because it could date itself, but it feels like a quarterback decision is looming any minute now with the guys that they're in on. So I'd say probably one of the quarterbacks, whether it's DeQuan Finn or Mikey Keene and Justice Haynes. Does that feel right to you?
Yeah, I was going to say him or maybe Emmanuel Carnley, the corner from Arizona. I could see those being, 2 guys that make decisions soon. Also, Josh Thompson, the offensive lineman, can play guard, can play tackle from Northwestern, is nearing a decision as well, wrapped up some visits. So I do think we'll see some decisions here soon. The dead periods here, the guys that took the bulk of their visits are usually, pretty much the guys that entered right when the portal opened. They may make some decisions here in the next few days. And then some other guys will have to wait to see if they get on campus or if they go elsewhere and take a couple trips. But I think we could get some decisions here soon. I think those 3 guys maybe, or like one of the 2 quarterbacks, DeQuan Finn, Mikey Keene, and then potentially Justice Haynes, Emmanuel Carnley, Josh Thompson, I guess.
All right, here comes another plot twist one that you're not ready for. This is from Saturday on our board. And again, this is Saturday's question. These are not my words. He says, what's the difference between Bigfoot and an Ohio State cheerleader. He says one weighs 800 pounds and has long, matted, smelly hair and eats out of a dumpster, and the other has big feet. And he says, my apologies to Sasquatch 616 in advance for making fun of his mother. That's not a question. That's just something I read. So any thoughts on that?
Well, this is a pro-woman podcast, so I don't want to.
Yeah, I regretted reading that almost immediately. So shout out Saturday, shout out Sasquatch 616.
Seems like he thinks there's not much of a difference.
Hey, you know what? It's in the eye of the beholder, right? Let's go to Pump It Up. Ask the question that kind of ties in with the Ohio State Penn State thing. He says, do you know a good psychiatrist in case OSU or Penn State win it all? No, I probably need to find one. I will say that, at this point, Penn State winning it all would be much better than the other scenario.
Who would Michigan fans rather have win it all, Penn State or Notre Dame, if they had to pick? I would think Penn. Well, but Notre Dame's not in the Big Ten. You don't really want another Big Ten team to win it, especially 1 year after you did. But you also hate Notre Dame if you're a Michigan fan. So, I mean, Notre Dame fans were besides themselves that Michigan won it last year. They were all torn up. But it is different when you have conference members in the mix.
It's interesting when you have this conversation. It's between fan bases that hate your guts, like that. Just
right.
The thought of you winning anything is just sends them to a psychiatrist. So, yeah, maybe ask one of their fans. They can help you out. I'm not sure. They have recent experience with that. So, this is from Blue is Gold, who says, I'm a little concerned about the number of quarterbacks in the 2025 quarterback room. 4 QBs probably aren't enough. This assumes that Warren and Davis stay. Any good news pertaining to recent transfer visits? Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what we just talked about. I think it's a pretty darn good shot that Michigan's bridge quarterback is either DeQuan Finn or Mikey Keene. And in fact, that's not a bold prediction at all. Like, those are the 2 guys they're in on at this point.
Yeah, you have to add another. I mean, I think we talked about it last week with the quarterback numbers. It's not just about, you want to get the best quarterback possible, but at a certain point too, at the very least, you have to bring someone in that can at least compete or be a backup or whatever, because you can't go in with this current quarterback room. Jaden Davis was in a very poor quarterback room this year and wasn't able to climb up to even second on the depth chart. Davis Warren, we all saw what he is this year. I think he's somebody you want on this team. And then you have a freshman and Bryce Underwood coming in, Chase Herbstreit as well. But Bryce Underwood, chance to compete next year, but you need another one. So I'm concerned about that number 4 as well, but I think so is the coaching staff, and that's why they're going to get somebody.
Yeah, they're going to add someone. It'll get up to 5, and then you hope. I hope they're able to keep everyone after that. So you have a good 5-man room instead of a room last year where you're just waiting, hoping anyone could step up for this team. Got a couple more here. This is from the guy 49503 who says, what are we cooking for the holidays?
Had a Christmas party yesterday. We went with lasagna and prime rib is a great combo. Maybe some ham on the 25th.
Yeah. We do. So we're hosting a cookie baking thing at our house tonight with family. I should say my wife is doing most of that. I want to give credit where credit's due.
Please credit.
Lasagna is on the menu for that. And then Christmas Eve, we will do prime rib with her family. And then Christmas Day, my side has always kind of done the traditional ham, whatever. Just think of the sides at a holiday. Like, that's what we'll have there. So pretty nice. To me, that's a pretty darn good 1, 2, 3 to lead off any batting order as far as I'm concerned. So
that's a hell of an order. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to be very bloated through the rest of the week. And I have to get some time in on the treadmill before I make the flight down to Tampa. I will not have a beach body for bowl season this year. Let's go to, I think this will be our last one. And it ties in, of course, with the Christmas sweater here, wear the Lion sweater if you're watching the video. It's from Hoops Coach M3D, who says, would it be fair to compare Moore and McGee's roster building philosophy from what we've seen so far to their neighbors in Detroit in Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes. See, it's the synergy.
I did that the other day too, actually.
He says not going after big name free agents in the portal, but instead looking for players to complement what's on the roster and preferring to build more through the draft, in this case, high school recruits. I think that's the right way to do it regardless. For me, I think you can't, I don't think you can just go shopping and, kind of put everything together, throw all these free agents in the air fryer and bam, you've got a gourmet meal. I think that, you want to build your foundation through the high school ranks. I think that they've done a good job of that. Certainly in this class here, I think they still have some talent left over from the last few years. And then you augment that via the portal. I don't think a program, even the programs that throw around this big money, I think they would prefer to kind of have guys in-house, but that's why you go to the portal and you get these guys that might finish out your quarterback room or might start for you at wide receiver. So I think I don't think it has anything to do with like not going after quote unquote high priced guys. I think that, when you know what's available to you, what you're able to offer people, you kind of have to make the best stew possible with what your roster needs are, with how many guys you need to add. Listen, if Michigan only had to add 5 or 6 guys, I'd be all for going to throw, $2 million at a wide receiver. But this is a group that needs talent in a lot of areas. And I think you can get pretty good comparable talent by spreading it out a little bit. So I think that comparison is apt.
I think it's too early to like make that specific of a.
Yeah, we're talking about, we're comparing arguably the best GM and head coach combo in the NFL right now to a first-year head coach and a GM and Sean McGee, who's doing a great job, but still very much in the early stages of this.
I agree, but I think that strategy is the right one too. I mean, you look at these. There are kind of 2 ways to go about it. The Colorado way, where Deion Sanders said he's pretty much not even going to do in-home visits. I love Deion, and it worked for him this year, and it looks like they're going to build a pretty good roster for next season as well. But it's a completely different strategy than, Michigan, which wants to supplement what they already have through the transfer portal, develop guys they get through the high school ranks. Those guys may be a little bit cheaper initially, then you have to sign them to bigger deals as time moves on, and revenue sharing will help with all of that as it comes next season. But yeah, also having to get a bunch of guys in the transfer portal it's such a big margin for error, or I guess slim margin for error, because every year you got to reload. So you don't know who you're going to get. These guys are in the transfer portal for a reason. Sometimes you don't know what kind of culture you're going to be able to build. You don't know what kind of continuity you have. So it's a tough deal to have to do that every year. The better way to do it is kind of build through high school ranks, develop, and then fill holes like you did last year to win a national championship through the transfer portal.
Yep, and the development is key. I thought if there's one thing, there are several things you could nitpick from this year, but I don't think the development of the talent that wasn't Mason Graham, Colston Loveland, etc. I don't know if that was exactly where it needed to be. So got to improve there. That's the key to all of it. Hey, that's going to do it for us today in our pre-Christmas /holiday /New Year episode. Guys, thank you so much for following us through a wonderful year. It's not goodbye for 2024. We'll do a show on Thursday. We will do our Monday show next week, previewing the bowl game down in Tampa. But for the purposes of maybe you're on your way to grandma's house, maybe you're at the airport, waiting to meet your parents, whatever it is, thank you for having us be the soundtrack to that through this and through a lot of moments this year. So for producer Megan behind the scenes, for my co-host Clayton Safey, on behalf of the Wolverine in general, I'm Anthony Broom. Be sure to like and subscribe to this channel, or like this video, subscribe to the channel for more videos. Leave us a review wherever you get your audio versions of your shows. Use that promo code UM1 for 2 months of access for $1. And we will talk to you after you've unwrapped your presents.